The school bus driver handed my 7-year-old a phone number and said, "Call this if your mom doesn't come home tonight." My daughter Sophia came through the front door, clutching a crumpled piece of paper, her backpack dragging on the floor behind her. "Daddy, the bus driver gave me this." She held out the paper with small hands that were still sticky from whatever snack they'd had at school. I took it from her, my mind not fully processing what I was reading at first. A phone number written in shaky handwriting, and below it, emergency contact. Use if your mother doesn't come home. Don't tell anyone else. My heart started pounding as I knelt down to Sophia's level. "Sweetheart, what exactly did the bus driver say when she gave you this?" Sophia's face scrunched up as she tried to remember the exact words. "She said, Mommy might not come home tonight, and I should call that number if she doesn't. She said it was a secret, and I shouldn't tell anyone. But I can tell you because you're my daddy." "Was it Mrs. Patterson, the regular driver?" Sophia nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, she's always nice and gives us stickers when we're good." Mrs. Patterson had been driving Sophia's bus route for 2 years. A pleasant woman in her 50s who I'd exchanged pleasantries with dozens of times. Why would she give my daughter a cryptic message about my wife not coming home? "Is Mommy home?" Sophia asked, starting to look worried. I forced myself to smile. "Yes, sweetie. Mommy's just upstairs working. Why don't you go wash your hands and I'll get you a snack?" As soon as Sophia ran toward the bathroom, I pulled out my phone and called my wife, Julia. She answered on the second ring, sounding distracted. "Hey, what's up? I'm in the middle of something." Her voice was normal, alive, completely fine. "Are you okay? Where are you?" The urgency in my voice must have alarmed her because her tone changed immediately. "I'm in my office upstairs." "What's wrong?" Relief flooded through me. "Nothing. I'll explain in a minute." Julia came downstairs 5 minutes later, concern etched on her face. "What's going on? You sounded panicked." I showed her the paper and explained what Sophia had told me. Julia's face went white. Why would Mrs. Patterson give this to Sophia? What does she think is going to happen to me? We stood in the kitchen staring at each other, both trying to make sense of something that made no sense. "Should we call the number?" Julia asked, her hand trembling. I shook my head. "Not yet. Let me call the school first." I dialed the elementary school's main office and asked to speak to the principal. Mrs. S. Donnelly came on the line sounding cheerful until I explained why I was calling. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison, but I don't understand. Mrs. Patterson has been a model employee for 8 years. There must be some misunderstanding." I read her the exact wording of the note, and there was a long silence. "Mr. Harrison, I'm going to need you to bring that note to the school tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I'll speak with Mrs. Patterson and get to the bottom of this." That night, Julia and I couldn't sleep. We lay in bed staring at the ceiling, both jumping at every small sound. What if she knows something we don't? Julia whispered in the darkness. What if there is some threat against me that we're not aware of? Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Don't go to the school tomorrow. Don't tell them about the note. Your wife is in danger and the school is involved. Meet me at Riverside Park at 6 a.m. Come alone, Mrs. Patterson." I showed the text to Julia. "This is insane," she said, her voice rising with panic. "Should we call the police?" I didn't know what to do. Let me go to the park and hear what she has to say. If it's nothing, we'll report it. If there's something real going on, at least we'll know what we're dealing with. At 5:30 a.m., I kissed Julia and Sophia goodbye and drove to Riverside Park. Mrs. Patterson was sitting on a bench near the river, looking 10 years older than she had the last time I'd seen her. "Mr. Harrison, thank you for coming," she said as I approached, her voice shaking. "I know this seems crazy, but you need to listen to everything I'm going to tell you." I sat down on the bench, my phone in my pocket with 911 ready to dial. "Start talking." Mrs. Patterson took a deep breath. 3 weeks ago, I was driving my regular route when I overheard 2 school administrators talking about your wife. They didn't know I could hear them through the open window of the bus while I was parked outside the school. She pulled out her phone and showed me a voice recording. I recorded part of their conversation. Listen. The audio was muffled but audible. 2 voices, one male and one female, discussing something that made my blood run cold. "Julia Harrison's audit is getting too close. She's going to find the discrepancies in the construction fund." The male voice sounded frustrated. "We need to handle this before she presents her findings to the board next week." The female voice responded, "What do you suggest?" The male voice got quieter. "There are other ways to handle problems. My brother-in-law works for a company that specializes in making problems disappear." The recording ended there, and Mrs. Patterson was watching my face carefully. "Your wife is a forensic accountant, right? She's been auditing the school district's finances." I nodded slowly, my mind reeling. Julia had mentioned she was working on a big audit for the district. Something about construction contracts, but she'd said it was routine. She found something, didn't she? Something worth killing her over. Mrs. Patterson's expression was grim. "I don't know exactly what she found, but I know that Principal Donnelly and the district superintendent are involved in whatever corruption she's uncovering. When you called the school yesterday, you gave them a heads up that you knew something was wrong. That's why I texted you last night. I felt sick. You're saying the principal and superintendent are planning to murder my wife over an audit?" Mrs. Patterson gripped my arm urgently. "I gave Sophia that note because I didn't know how else to warn you without putting myself at risk. If they find out I know, I'm probably next." I stood up from the bench, pacing. "Why didn't you just go to the police with this?" Mrs. Patterson laughed bitterly. "Because the police chief's wife is the district's head of procurement. She's the one who approves all the construction contracts. This corruption goes deeper than just the school." I pulled out my phone and called Julia. "Don't go to work today. Don't go anywhere. Stay home with Sophia and lock all the doors. I'm coming home right now." Mrs. Patterson reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. "I've been documenting everything I've noticed for the past year. Photographs of documents, copies of emails, records of conversations I've overheard. It's not much, but it's a start." I took the flash drive and thanked her. What are you going to do now? Are you safe? Mrs. Patterson shook her head. I'm leaving town today. I have a sister in Montana. I'm going to stay with her until this blows over. She looked at me with sad eyes. Protect your family, Mr. Harrison. These people don't play games. When I got home, Julia was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open. Sophia still asleep upstairs. Tell me everything, she said. I explained Mrs. Patterson's warning and played her the recording. That's Donnelly and Superintendent Carson, Julia confirmed. I'd recognized their voices anywhere. She pulled up a spreadsheet on her laptop. The district has been awarding construction contracts to a company called Summit Development for the past 5 years. Summit has been paid over $30 million for various projects. She highlighted certain rows, but when I started digging into Summit Development, I found that it's a shell company. No employees, no physical address, no previous work history. The company exists only on paper. I stared at the numbers on the screen. So, where did the $30 million go? Julia pulled up more documents. The money goes into Summit's accounts and then immediately transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. I traced what I could, and it looks like the money eventually flows back to personal accounts belonging to Carson, Donnelly, and at least 4 other school board members. Have you presented any of this to anyone yet? Julia shook her head. I'm supposed to give my preliminary findings to the school board next Monday, but I haven't shared the details with anyone except my boss at the accounting firm. That gave us a few days. We need to go to the FBI, not the local police. Julia was already closing her laptop. I'll copy everything to multiple flash drives and send encrypted copies to my personal email. While Julia worked on securing her data, I went upstairs to check on Sophia. She was still sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that the adults in her life were dealing with something that felt like a nightmare. By 9 a.m., we had everything organized and were preparing to drive to the FBI field office in Phoenix. But as I was loading bags into the car, a black SUV pulled up in front of our house. 2 men in suits got out, and something about the way they moved made me freeze. Julia, don't come outside, I called back, but she was already at the door. The men approached with professional smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Harrison, we're with Summit Development. We understand there's been some confusion about our company, and we'd like to clear things up. My hand moved toward my phone. I don't know what you're talking about. Please leave our property. The taller man's smile got wider and colder. I think you do know, Mrs. Harrison. We've been informed that you've been conducting an audit that contains some inaccurate information. We'd like to review your findings before you present them to anyone. Julia's voice was steady. I don't discuss my work with people outside the official channels. If Summit Development has concerns, they can contact my firm directly. The shorter man stepped closer. Mrs. Harrison, I think there's been a misunderstanding about how important it is that we resolve this matter privately for everyone's safety. The threat was barely veiled. I pulled out my phone. You have 3 seconds to get off our property. The tall man laughed. Mr. Harrison, calling the police won't help you, but I'll leave you with this thought. You have a beautiful daughter, 7 years old, right? It would be a shame if something happened to her because her parents made poor decisions. The rage that flooded through me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. But Julia grabbed my arm. We're recording this conversation, she said loudly, holding up her phone. You just threatened a child. That's a federal crime. The man exchanged a glance. The shorter man shrugged. We're just trying to have a conversation, but Mrs. Harrison, you should know that accidents happen all the time. House fires, car accidents, random break-ins. They walked back to their SUV and drove away slowly, deliberately. Julia and I stood in the driveway shaking. We need to leave right now, I said. We got Sophia out of bed, told her we were going on an unexpected trip, and we're in the car within 15 minutes. Julia was on her phone with the FBI. They're saying they need us to come to the Phoenix office to make a formal complaint. They can't send agents without an official report first. I was watching the rearview mirror constantly. Tell them we have evidence of a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme and we've been directly threatened. Tell them our daughter was threatened. Finally, someone seemed to understand the urgency. They're sending 2 agents to meet us halfway at their resident agency in Casa Grande. The drive felt like it took forever. When we pulled up to the FBI office, 2 agents were waiting. A woman in her 40s and a younger man. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison. I'm Special Agent Rebecca Foster, and this is Special Agent David Park. Let's go inside. For the next 3 hours, we laid out everything. Julia presented her audit findings. I played Mrs. B. Patterson's recording and showed them her flash drive. We told them about the men who'd threatened Sophia. Agent Foster listened carefully, taking notes. When we finished, she and Agent Park exchanged a significant look. What you've uncovered is part of a much larger investigation, Foster said carefully. The FBI has been looking into corruption in your city's government for the past year. Your audit has provided the financial evidence we've been trying to gather. I felt relief mixed with frustration. If you already knew about this, why didn't you protect us? Agent Park spoke up. We didn't know the targets were aware our investigation existed. Someone tipped them off about your audit. That means we have a leak somewhere. Foster nodded. We can arrange for you to stay in a secure location while we expedite our investigation. With your evidence, we should be able to move quickly on search warrants, but I need to be honest. This is going to get complicated. You're going to be witnesses in federal court, and your lives are going to be disrupted for a long time. We looked at each other. We don't have a choice, I said finally. If we don't help you stop these people, they'll keep stealing and threatening anyone who gets in their way. The FBI arranged for us to stay in a hotel under assumed names. Sophia thought it was an adventure at first, but after a few days, she started asking when we could go home. Agent Foster called every few days with updates. They'd executed search warrants on Carson's home, on Donnie's properties, on Summit Development's offices, and on the school board members' homes. They'd found evidence of fraud, money laundering, and bribery. The corruption scheme had stolen close to $50 million over 7 years, but they still hadn't found the 2 men who'd threatened us. We have their faces from your doorbell camera, but they're not in any databases. Without names, they're hard to track. 3 weeks into protective custody, I got a call from an unknown number. Mr. Harrison, this is Mrs. Patterson. I was surprised to hear from her. Are you okay? Her voice sounded strained. I'm safe, but I need to tell you something. I've been following the news about the arrests. They got Carson and Donnelly, but there's someone else they haven't arrested yet. My heart started pounding. Who? There was a long pause. The mayor. Mayor Buchanan organized the whole scheme. Carson and Donnelly reported to him. He's the one who set up Summit Development. The FBI must not know about his involvement yet. She explained she'd found more evidence. Emails between Buchanan and Carson. Bank records showing transfers to accounts in his wife's name. But Mr. Harrison. Buchanan knows the FBI is closing in. I think he's going to run, and I think he's going to eliminate anyone who can testify against him first. I called Agent Foster immediately. Within 24 hours, they had enough evidence to get a warrant for Buchanan's arrest, but when agents went to his house, he was gone. His wife said he'd left for a business trip, but there was no flight booked in his name. Buchanan is in the wind, Foster told me. Based on what we found in his house, we believe he's desperate enough to do something drastic. I'm recommending we move you to a different location immediately. That night, as we were packing, the fire alarm went off. The hotel staff said it was probably false, but the timing felt wrong. I grabbed Sophia and Julia and we ran for the stairs. As we were rushing down the stairwell, I heard footsteps coming up fast. Keep going, I told Julia, pushing them ahead while I turned to see who was following. It was one of the men from our house, the shorter one. He had something in his hand that looked like a gun. And when he saw me turn, he started running faster. I did the only thing I could think of. I charged at him. We crashed into the concrete wall, both grunting with impact. The gun went flying down the stairs. He was stronger, better trained, and within seconds, he had me pinned with his forearm across my throat. You should have taken the deal, he said through gritted teeth. I couldn't breathe, black spots appearing at the edges of my vision. Then I heard Julia's voice shouting, FBI, get on the ground. Agent Park had been stationed outside our room and heard the alarm. The man let go and ran back up the stairs, disappearing through a door. I collapsed against the wall, gasping while Park called for backup. The man escaped, but the FBI now knew Buchanan was actively trying to harm us. They moved us to a federal safe house with armed guards 24/7. Buchanan liquidated his offshore accounts, Foster explained. He has millions of dollars, which means he can hire the best people. We're treating this as a credible threat to your lives. Days turned into weeks in strange limbo. Then 6 weeks after the hotel attack, Foster came with news. We found Buchanan. He was hiding in Mexico. We worked with Mexican authorities to apprehend him. He's being extradited. The relief was overwhelming, but Foster's expression said there was more. He's offered to make a deal. He'll testify against everyone he worked with. Corrupt contractors, officials who took bribes, organized crime connections. In exchange, he wants a reduced sentence. I felt anger surge. He tried to have us killed and he gets a reduced sentence. Foster nodded sympathetically. His testimony will help us dismantle a network that extends far beyond your city. Sometimes we have to make these deals. The trial took place 8 months later. Julia and I both testified. Mrs. Patterson testified via video link from Montana. Too afraid to come back. The 2 men who'd threatened us were never found. Buchanan got 12 years in federal prison. Carson and Donnelly got 8 years each. The school board members got various sentences. We were finally allowed to go home 10 months after the nightmare started. Our house felt foreign, like it belonged to different people. Sophia had to change schools because we couldn't send her back where the principal had been planning to murder her mother. She'd been in therapy for months, dealing with trauma she couldn't understand. Julia quit her job and started working for the FBI as a consultant on fraud cases. She couldn't go back to regular accounting after everything. Mrs. Patterson never came back to the city. She'd lost her job, her home, her community because she tried to do the right thing. We stayed in touch and every Christmas I sent her a gift card thanking her for saving our lives. The experience changed all of us. Sophia developed anxiety about strangers. Julia became hypervigilant. I found myself constantly second-guessing people's motives, but we survived. Julia's audit helped recover over $40 million that was returned to the school district. New safeguards were put in place. The city elected a new mayor and school board on platforms of transparency. Sometimes I thought about that moment when Sophia handed me the crumpled paper. How that single act of courage from a school bus driver had set everything in motion. If Mrs. Patterson had stayed silent, Julia would have presented her findings to a corrupt board, actively planning to silence her. We might not have survived. Mrs. Patterson had risked everything to warn a family she barely knew, exposing a corruption scheme that had harmed thousands. Heroes don't always look like we expect. Sometimes they're middle-aged school bus drivers who pay attention and care enough to act. A year after everything ended, we had a small celebration for Sophia's 8th birthday. As we sang happy birthday, I caught Julia's eye across the table. We both smiled. We'd made it. We'd survived something that could have destroyed us. Later that night, sitting on the back porch, Julia asked, "Do you ever regret it? Our lives would be simpler if ID just missed the discrepancies." Julia thought for a minute. No, those people were stealing from children, from the community. If I'd looked the other way, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. 3 years later, we made a trip to Montana to visit Mrs. Patterson. She'd gotten a job at a community center and seemed more at peace. "I don't regret what I did," she told us over dinner. "But I do regret that it took me so long to act. If I'd acted sooner, maybe you wouldn't have gone through so much trauma." I shook my head. "You acted when you could with the information you had. You risked your entire life to help people you barely knew. That's not something to regret." The ripple effects continued for years. New investigations opened into other departments. More arrests were made. The culture of city government changed with oversight and transparency becoming the norm. Julia's work with the FBI led to several other major fraud cases being solved. Sophia eventually adjusted to her new normal, though she never quite lost the edge of anxiety. She was more observant than other kids, always watching for things that didn't add up. I changed careers, leaving my corporate job to teach high school civics. I wanted to help kids understand how government is supposed to work and what happens when corruption goes unchecked. On the first day of every semester, I told my students a version of our story, emphasizing how important it is to speak up when you see something wrong. 5 years after the trial, Sophia asked me, "What should you do if you see something wrong but don't know who to trust?" It was a question without easy answers. I think you have to trust your instincts and be willing to take a risk. Mrs. Patterson took a huge risk giving you that note. But she did what she thought was right, even though she was scared. Sophia nodded. "I think I want to be like that when I grow up. Someone who does the right thing even when it's scary." My chest tightened with pride and fear. That's a good goal. But remember that doing the right thing doesn't mean you have to do it alone. Find people you trust. Build support systems. Protect yourself while you're protecting others. 10 years after the note, the city held a ceremony honoring Julia for her role in exposing the corruption. Mrs. Patterson flew in from Montana for the event, her first time back since fleeing. When they called her name to receive a Citizen Service Award, the entire auditorium stood and applauded for nearly 5 minutes. In her acceptance speech, Mrs. Patterson's voice shook, but grew stronger. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who couldn't look away when I knew something was wrong. For weeks, I was terrified. But then I thought about all the children on my bus. I realized that staying silent would have been worse than any consequence I might face." Sophia, now 17, had tears streaming down her face. After the ceremony, we all went to dinner. Our family, Mrs. Patterson, Agent Foster, who'd retired, and Dylan Martinez, a young witness from another case who was now a lawyer fighting corruption. "It's funny how things connect," Julia said, raising her glass. Mrs. Patterson's courage led to justice. That justice inspired others. Every act of courage creates ripples. Mrs. Patterson smiled. "I got a letter from a teacher saying that because we recovered that stolen money, they were able to hire art and music teachers, reduce class sizes, update textbooks. That's what it was all for. Kids getting the education they deserve." Sophia spoke up, her voice steady. "Mrs. Patterson, what you did changed my whole life. Not just because you saved my mom, but because you showed me what real courage looks like. It's not about being fearless. You were terrified. It's about doing what's right, even when you're scared." Years continued to pass. Sophia graduated valedictorian and was accepted to law school with a full scholarship. Julia's work led to a textbook on forensic accounting. I continued teaching, inviting guest speakers involved in the case to share their experiences with new students. On the 10th anniversary, the city unveiled a monument in front of the new government center, a bronze sculpture of a school bus with a plaque reading, "In honor of all citizens who choose courage over comfort, truth over silence, and justice over convenience." Mrs. Patterson stood at the unveiling, older but carrying herself with quiet dignity. "This is too much," she whispered. "I don't deserve a monument." Julia put her arm around her. "You saved lives, exposed criminals, and inspired a community to demand better. That's absolutely worth commemorating." That evening, we hosted a gathering for key people who'd been part of our journey. As we sat around the fire pit, Dylan said, "I was thinking about alternate timelines. In another reality, Mrs. Patterson stays silent because she's too scared. Julia presents her findings to a corrupt board and something terrible happens. All these moments where things could have gone wrong but didn't because people chose to act." Mrs. Patterson stared into the fire. "I think about the version of me that stayed silent. She probably kept her comfortable life, but she'd also have to live knowing she could have prevented harm and chose not to. I wouldn't want to be that version of myself." Sophia, now preparing for law school, spoke with conviction. "That's what I want to teach my future clients. Staying silent might feel safer in the moment, but it has a cost to your soul, to your community. Every person here made the hard choice at some point, and those choices matter." 15 years after the scandal, Buchanan was released from prison. The news made headlines, and old anxieties resurfaced. But Buchanan was a broken man, divorced, children downing him, fortune gone, reputation destroyed. He released a statement apologizing for his crimes. "I stole from children, threatened innocent families, corrupted institutions meant to serve the public. No amount of prison time can undo the damage. I can only hope the exposure of my crimes led to reforms." Julia read his statement and felt nothing. "He's not worth my energy anymore. He's just a sad old man who destroyed his own life through greed. The best revenge is that we're happy and successful while he has nothing." Sophia finished law school and took a job with a nonprofit investigating governmental corruption and providing legal services to whistleblowers. Her first major case involved helping a county auditor who discovered officials taking bribes. When that case resulted in convictions, Sophia called Mrs. Patterson. "You set all of this in motion. Every case I win traces back to the courage you showed." 20 years after the note, we organized a reunion of everyone involved in the corruption case. Over 100 people showed up. Former FBI agents, lawyers, whistleblowers, journalists, reformed criminals who testified, teachers whose jobs had been saved, students whose education had benefited. The event featured speeches and stories about how the case had affected lives. A teacher explained that recovered funds had allowed the district to give her a raise, preventing her from leaving education. A student, now a college graduate, said improved facilities had inspired him to become an engineer designing educational spaces. During the reunion, Sophia gave a speech that brought many to tears. I was 7 when this started. I didn't understand what was happening. All I knew was that a nice bus driver had given me a piece of paper. That simple act saved my mother's life and changed my entire existence. I became a lawyer because of you, Mrs. Patterson. I fight corruption because of you. Everything good that comes from my career is part of your legacy. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. As the reunion wound down, we stood looking at a photo timeline showing the progression from that first note through 20 years of consequences and reforms. How many times this could have gone differently, Julia said quietly. If Mrs. Patterson hadn't given Sophia that note. If we'd ignored the warning, any one of those moments could have broken differently. Mrs. Patterson nodded. That's why we can never take justice for granted. It's not inevitable. It requires people to make hard choices. I made one hard choice, but all of you made dozens that followed. Justice is a team effort. Sophia took a photo of the 4 of us. This is going on my office wall, a reminder of what happens when ordinary people refuse to be bystanders. On the 25th anniversary, Sophia published a book titled The School Bus Driver's Legacy. How Ordinary Courage Creates Extraordinary Change. It became a bestseller and required reading in law schools and ethics courses. Mrs. Patterson attended the launch party, now in her 80s. When asked to say a few words, she stood at the podium. I've never thought of myself as special. I was just a school bus driver who heard something terrible and couldn't unhear it. I was scared. I doubted myself. But I kept thinking about those children, about the future they deserve. I realized the world doesn't change because heroes swoop in. It changes because ordinary people decide that today they're going to do something hard and scary because it's right. Her voice grew stronger. If you're hearing this story and thinking I could never be that brave, I want you to know I thought the same about myself. I was terrified every day for months. But I did it anyway, and you can too. Whatever injustice you're witnessing, whatever wrong you have the power to expose, do it. Because the alternative is a world where good people stay silent and bad people win. And I refuse to live in that world. That night, driving home from the book launch, Julia and I talked about the strange trajectory our lives had taken. Do you ever wonder what we'd be doing if none of this had happened? I asked. Julia thought about it. We'd probably be older, more complacent, less aware of how fragile justice is. I wouldn't trade what we went through. It gave us purpose and showed us what we're capable of. As we pulled into our driveway, I noticed a package on our doorstep. Inside was a framed photograph from the book launch showing 4 generations. Mrs. Patterson in her 80s, Julia and me in our 50s, Sophia in her 30s, and Sophia's young intern. Attached was a note. The legacy continues. Every generation learns from the one before. Thank you for showing me what courage looks like. Julie and I sat holding the photograph, reflecting on 25 years of consequences from a school bus driver's decision to act. The crumpled paper was long gone, but its impact would ripple through generations who'd learned that ordinary courage could create extraordinary change. Thanks for exploring all these questions with me today. It's been a pretty curious little journey to share together. Until next time, take care. Subscribe for more content like this.